Hello and welcome to my final presentation for the Natural Capital Singapore project, or NatCap for short. My name is Leon and I'm a research associate with the Terrestrial team, and I support the project with geospatial analysis. I would like to use this opportunity to summarize the work I have done with NatCap in this testimonial presentation. My presentation is divided into 4 parts. First, I will present key findings from projects that I led about Singapore's terrestrial ecosystems. Second is the projects that I collaborated with other experts in their fields and the ways I supported their works. Third is about my contributions to the report and how our results were communicated. Finally, I would like to reflect on lessons learned throughout this journey. Before we begin, we needed to find out what and where different types of ecosystems were in Singapore. So I classified high-resolution multispectral satellite images of Singapore and supplemented it with other spatial information available in 2018. The result was an ecosystem map with a spatial resolution of 30 centimeters that had over 30 ecosystem classes, of which 16 were terrestrial ecosystems and 14 marine. Next, I looked back in time to study how ecosystems and Singapore's land cover has changed. To do this, we translated vegetation classes on old historical maps and compared them to vegetation types today. We showed that Singapore has gained over 16 kilometers squared of unmanaged vegetation, but this figure masks high losses and high gains between the 73 years of study. Even so, these semi-natural areas are largely inaccessible, as they are left that way for military training in Singapore. Looking into the future, Singapore has been greening itself and continues to do so, especially on land reclaimed from the sea. Using Google Earth Engine, we analyzed 27 years of Landsat imagery and calculated NDVI values as a proxy of vegetation maturity. Singapore has increased its median NDVI from 0.26 to 0.34, and we track the trends of NDVI on new land created and estimated that it takes 16.8 years for a 30 by 30 meter Landsat pixel to grow to an NDVI value of 0.7. While left to settle, these reclaimed lands can provide around 10 years of green vegetation that has ecosystem service benefits. Now, on to part 2 on my work with experts. Within NatCap, I provided geospatial expertise on a mangrove ecosystem bundling project where my colleague, Dr. Alemu, wanted to find out which mangrove areas in Singapore provides the most variety of ecosystem services. I'll let him elaborate more in his own presentation. Next is a novel elevation model where the marine team and I combine a terrestrial elevation in a DTM with their bathymetric depths from a nautical chart and normalize the two datums for coastal ecosystem studies. The terrestrial team also hosted interns during the summer vacations, and I had the privilege to support an ecosystem services modeling project of HDB's flagship Tengah Forest Town. We calculated the changes to 5 ecosystem services provided before and after development with a model of the land cover of Tengah Forest Town after development. We then compared the ecosystem provisions of Tengah's Forest Town to 4 older townships in Singapore. Beyond NatCap, I also supported external agencies on some of their own research questions. With SLA, they were curious to find out the differences in elevation measurements between their terrain models and the Maritime Port Authority's bathymetric data. With the ecosystem services in landscapes projects in FCL, I contributed with data of vegetation in Singapore and mapping them out. With QG, I was approached to derive land covers of localities where bird transect surveys were done to see if landscapes affect bird life. Now, reporting of natural capital in Singapore. I led the writing of a chapter that evaluated the ecosystem benefit of water supply in Singapore. From data provided by the Public Utilities Board, we estimated that there is about 410 square kilometers of catchment areas that covered roughly 2/3 of Singapore's land area, of which 33 kilometers squared are reservoirs. Stakeholders from a workshop led by the valuation team ranked water supply as the second most important service that nature provides in Singapore. Finally, in a thought experiment of ours, we adapted a stock and flows model from a previous study and calculated that the supply of water from only reservoirs will last 4 months based on normal consumption, should the other taps of new water, desalination, and imported water run dry. Finally, we needed to communicate our results and make data available to stakeholders like decision makers and researchers. I have visualized our data outputs on an online web application where users can click and query ecosystems and 12 ecosystem services in Singapore. There will be a link to view the metadata for each map layer and to download the data for their own use. The data will be hosted on Figshare, an online platform where researchers store and share research data. As we answered our research questions, more came to light. Singapore's landscape is heavily manicured and made possible by cheap foreign labor. Many landscape maintenance contractors were uncooperative when discussing costs, so we needed to reframe our question into costs other than monetary terms like time and resources. Satellite remote sensing can only show so much detail of vegetation, provided there are no clouds. Unmanned aerial systems with infrared capabilities can complement satellite imagery to provide more details even in overcast situations, like the day these images were collected. With the release of Master Plan 2019, we can also model the changes to land cover in Singapore and also areas still subject to detailed planning and how these changes affect ecosystem services in Singapore in future. My almost 3 years here has taught me many lessons, and I'll highlight 3 important ones. First, in research, I'm all for sharing data openly with proper acknowledgement, and I am always ready to offer my geospatial expertise to others, researchers, and I might just learn something from the collaborations. Second, things change. The best example is COVID that messed up all my plans. And so I had to be creative in my workarounds and be flexible with my goals. Third, sometimes simplicity is key, especially when doing and communicating research. Machine learning may be the in thing, but sometimes manual and tedious processes might be the best solution given circumstances, especially when accuracy and time to learn is not on your side. Communicating results clearly and concisely convinces stakeholders and manuscript reviewers too. To conclude my presentation about Singapore's terrestrial ecosystems, 1. They are dynamic and are always changing and adapting to new urbanscapes and economic forces. And so for our planners and researchers to keep up to the status of ecosystems in Singapore, they need ready-made tools or at least established standard operating procedures to take them through the steps of rapidly assessing ecosystem status and calculating the changes to ecosystem services based on development scenarios. In the case of Singapore, that has been referred to as land scarce, there is no waste of land or even sea, as every bit has a purpose and ecosystem function. Rather, there is space that can be harnessed and balanced with competing land use and ecosystem services provision. Before I end, I would like to extend my heartfelt thanks to some colleagues who have made my time at NatCap very fulfilling. Thanks to my supervisor, Dr. Daniel Richards, who has been my mentor for nurturing my skills in research and guiding me in the right direction if my ideas get a little too crazy. Thanks to Dr. Alex Yee from NParks QH, who has been instrumental in connecting us to his network of colleagues in the government and research that helped foster collaborations. Thanks to Justine Saunders for being the engine of NatCap and keeping everything running smoothly so that things got done. Special thanks to Ng Zhen Hao from SLA for supporting the geospatial aspects of my work. And I always enjoy bouncing off GIS ideas off him and tapping on his extensive industry knowledge. With that, thank you all for your attention. I'd like to thank also the agencies and organizations that have made NatCap possible and for the training I've received as an RA here. If you have any questions, you may contact me via my personal email address over here.